Go, test, test, test. Must be working. Sound? No, big screen only. Sound. Let's see if that did it. Nope. That's better. All right. That takes care of that chat. Participants.
I was gonna ask if you had like time after class to go over the classes for next year that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we can do that. Probably just do it early. I'll just turn off the computer so we can just look up here. The biggest one is making sure that you've got your core courses out of the way, because they're the ones that they don't rotate around each semester. And we've got 2 that are in the spring, and then we have 3 that are in the fall. That would be was it systems, methods, and comparative? I can't remember. I'd have to pull it up.
Yeah.
Sure. Of course. Yeah. All right, so 7 minutes till class. I'm gonna get rolling. How are you today?
Oh, exhausted.
I know the feeling.
I had the longest weekend ever.
Ooh,
And then into this week.
one of those. Yeah, I had surprise. What was it? It was over the weekend. Maybe it was Friday. I can't remember. We've been trying to get in with the geneticists in Oklahoma City since February of last year, whenever we had our youngest, because she had a genetic thing.
Mhm.
And so they finally called us, I think it was Friday, to schedule an appointment, but it was because they had a cancellation for Monday. So we had to hot foot it to Oklahoma City Monday. I had to cancel classes and just run, because yeah, it's already taken me almost a year and a half to get in there.
Yeah.
And so, my goodness, it's not that far, but it sure does seem like a long time when you're
And
doing it.
you're like,
Yeah, yeah. And so, that was one trip. Tomorrow, I'm probably gonna have to go out to Arkansas, because I have to go to a bank that's only in Arkansas. That's, well, not only, it's just not here in Oklahoma, I should say. That'll be fun. But, Chicago was nice. It was windy. Of course, I got sick afterwards. That's, yeah. I don't know if you guys are watching the travel stuff, like with the boats hitting things and that kind of stuff.
mhm.
One of the things that's kind of been on my mind about that, I've seen other people kind of point out, it's particularly this Francis Scott Key Bridge, that one. If you watch the footage of the boat itself, you'll see that before it hits, all of the lights blink off.
Mhm.
So I'm really curious to see if that was something that was related to a cyber attack or just mismanagement, something like that.
Yeah.
The cyber stuff has a lot on my mind, because just in the flights themselves that we took over spring break, it's like all of their stuff did that this time too. A lot of previous times I've not flown a lot, but I know since they were, before they'd even get ready to power up or anything like that, they'd be going through their normal announcements. A couple different points where all the power just kind of shut off and blinked for a second, come back on. Is that normal? Is that abnormal? And boy, that sure does make me nervous.
We had a trip to London planned before COVID hit. And then I've tried to redo it since, and something's always came up. So I'm like, I think it's the universe saying that you don't need to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, plus that'd be one of those areas I really wouldn't want to be in if it were in lockdown, because they, like, well, UK, I mean, they're throughout this book. If you read the book,
Mhm.
most of their stuff's based in UK because they do it so well.
Yeah,
They do it so well over there because they don't have the same rights that we do.
yeah.
And so it's really interesting to see how much they've increased the scrutiny and how much that, the veneer of this is for public good versus this is, excessive, how far that veneer can go. Because I mean, hell, they've got TV shows where they'll show themselves sending officers to go de-escalate situations that haven't even arisen yet. That's good, but also it's a little frightening.
Yeah.
You start getting into that pre-crime stuff. Let's see, today we're gonna be moving into, we're gonna start talking about SEPTED stuff. Did we talk about SEPTED before in here? Okay, I didn't know if that phrase was familiar or not. We've been talking about it kind of indirectly, but here's where we start to address it directly. A lot of crime prevention courses will focus just on SEPTED. That's crime prevention through environmental design. But we'll give it a few minutes and see who all shows. Can't hear me connecting dot. Connecting dot. Hey Tristan, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Tristan, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Question. Oh, you can hear me. Okay, excellent. Good. I'll type it in. Sweet. All right. So we got 2 more minutes and then we'll begin. I'll show you that I've changed some stuff in Blackboard. And then we'll start talking about crime prevention through environmental design. And then, see, that's chapter 11, I think. Then we'll move into chapter 12. And then after that, we'll go into organization systems and that kind of stuff, because that's one that you guys will all need to have some familiarity with. Yeah. So it goes SEPTED, built environment, designing systems against crime, and then businesses, crime, and crime prevention. And so all those things will be really rolling together. And we'll have some conversations on how to handle things, maybe run into issues, because the advice that when you start seeing how the systems work, I don't want to say it's you learn how to work the system, but when it's running properly, when it isn't, and then you start figuring out how to troubleshoot it. And sometimes it takes a lot of work to troubleshoot things. So we'll talk about that. I'd expect us to be out of here by like 7:30 is what I would think. Just I'll talk to you guys. If you guys want to talk a lot, we can talk longer. But we'll see. A couple of people we're waiting on. Still got a couple minutes though. Meantime, let's move over here. I didn't pop in any extra supplemental things in any of these things, I don't think. I'm just gonna get rid of those. Originally, I was gonna go chapter by chapter and start giving you guys a whole bunch of stuff every chapter. Decided not to do that this time around. No, Irish review, you got those. Sweet. 1 minute. It is Wednesday. Yeah, we'll probably start there. And I'll start by sharing my screen. Now that it is officially 5:30, we'll begin. Share screen. All right, so you all are probably familiar with our course shells. We have two sections, but whichever one you're in, they'll be mirror images of each other. Of course, last time we canceled, I said read chapters 11 and 12 and 13. So we're going to talk about those today. I also went through and revised our timeline because I'd fallen behind that in the last couple of weeks. So I was hoping to get squared away over one person away from the pop in. Just tell me it's connecting the audio. Connecting the audio. It's coming up. Good connected. All right, Julie, can you hear me? I'm just going to assume that you can. Okay. All right. So last class, we had to cancel out this. I was not feeling well. But here we are again. And so I've updated the learning module section to include a better timeline because I'd fallen so woefully behind for you all. So revised timeline, we have 1 week until you need to get me a 3 to 5 page section on theory. So that's something you should already have been working on a little bit. Basically what this one is, identify a theory that you like. It could be within this textbook, or you can go more general if you really want to, even beyond crime prevention if you really want to. Because the idea for that is that's an opportunity, you'll have another opportunity in crime theory, if you're taking it this semester, to start working on what would be the one of the sections for your capstone. Because capstone goes introduction, lit review, then a 2 to, I think it's 3 to 5 page section on theory before you get to interpretation. So that's where that one fits, right? The next section would be the lit. There we go. In here, so assignment 2 would be your theory section. Assignment 3 would be your literature review. Now, whether you go thesis or capstone, you'll still need a lit review. So use this as one of those bases to start that for later on. So that's why we start this now. This paper, you'll have a few chances to revise it before you can start, whether it's capstone or thesis, those processes.
If I'm in the capstone too.
Yeah, you can just use the ones you've already got, so you don't have to rewrite it. That's the whole point of us having this conversation. So that way, you're just doing that one. That cuts it together. So instead of doing however many papers you got across all your courses, get it down to as many, hopefully, as just that one if you can. So that way you can focus in on that, because that's one that even though the capstone isn't that difficult, the pressure of it being at the end, I don't want you to feel stressed out about that, because there should be no pressure at that point, because there isn't. You're square. It's just going through that process and getting feedback from you and going through that, and that'll just take that one pass. And so that'll be a real quick turn, because the next thing is due in there. What is it? The next week, something like that.
Yeah, you
No.
do the theoretical,
Mhm.
and then after that, it's like the 3 pages, 3 to 5, of like.
Yeah, what it means, interpret it,
Yeah.
kind of apply the two together. Yeah, and so this is all theoretical. And if you're doing the thesis, what you'd want to do with the theory and lit review sections is you'd actually want to combine them. So you'd start out with the theory and then sew in your topic of choice. But if you have thesis, we'll talk about that. And so that's kind of the idea of how that fits together. And then between those two things, that is your term paper draft. Once you get feedback on this one, that one should take me only a few days, because the intros are really short. Lit reviews can take a little bit of time depending on how heavy you get into it. If you haven't received anything from me yet, you will in the next couple of days. Most of you have received something from me already, something. Usually I'm trying to get you guys, if I've got anything I've written on it before, I'll send it to you guys just so you can have it. If I've written something on it, it's usually not mine. It's something I've condensed down from other readings. And if I've even read on it, usually I download the stuff that I read. And so I'll send that to you if I find it. And that'll get you squared away, not just for this class, but for the end parts of the program, get you a leg up on that. Other things we need to talk about. Let's see, we changed those timelines. Timelines are now right up here. So April 10th, April 17th. So 1 week for the 3 to 5 page, another week to get the 5 pages after that. And then I'll have a couple weeks to get any feedback to you before you have that May 1st deadline, which is you'll get feedback from me. And if you've received feedback from me on anything, you know what I do is I turn on track changes. And so you can just go through and, okay, next, that's what the change was. Accept or reject, it's your choice. If you reject, just add a little bit more to kind of identify what the problem was, or if there's a question there, lay out an argument kind of thing. And then usually that'll be enough to, it's like, okay, condense those sentences down and that's square. And so move forward from there. And all that won't take very long at all, because that's usually like a day turnaround for you guys. Because by the time you get back to me, it's literally just highlight, accept. Oh, there's a question here. Type a little bit more. Okay, back to you. And it's done. And that's exactly what happened here. So that term paper drafts May 1. This one's set to May 10th if you need it. That would be the very last day of finals week. So if there's any reason whatsoever that we need to pass it back one more time after that, you still have that as an option. I don't really expect you guys to need that though. Usually whenever I have papers at this level, that first pass is usually enough to say, okay, that one's good to go for this, for now. So that's how that will run. But like I said, that's just a backup in case anybody needs it or they want to go ahead and send it in one more time. Other than that, trying Trying to think of other things I want you guys to do. I'll probably get you guys some opportunities to play with some of the data more as we go, just because there's more and more that's coming available. But we'll work on that after we've done the paper stuff. From there, we need to talk about chapters 11, 12, and 17. And so the first thing we need to talk about is SEPTED. I need to move that camera. Move that real quick. Come on. There we go. Cool. So SEPTED. That's crime prevention through environmental design. That's a very, very popular phrase in crime prevention. In fact, a lot of crime prevention courses, this is the only concept that they'll cover. Right? They'll just focus exclusively on crime prevention through environmental design, and that's the entire book. Is they'll focus on this aspect of crime prevention. So this is everything from city planning to architecture to all that good stuff. And so if you want to talk about SEPTED, you probably need to start with the history if you start talking about design and things related to security. The earliest person really that ties into this is a philosopher. I think that was that Bentham. I want to check that. The phrase there is panopticon. Let me check that real quick, because that's a textbook, book that came out. What was that? Well over 100 years ago. Panopticon book. No, not some novel. Yeah, that's just great. There's one set. There you go. Yeah. Bentham. 18th century. It's 200 years ago. So basically, if you start looking into panopticon, what this was originally dealt with was, you could say corrections. That's where it takes its roots. It has to do with prison design. If you've ever been in a prison, well, most modern prisons, they don't necessarily have to have the same setup as this. But it's the idea that if you're in a centralized location, your guard station, that depending on how the room is set up, you can see every cell that's in there. It's set up around you, so where each and every individual one is viewable. So you have direct line of sight. So that way you have the most ability to see stuff, to surveil, and that way problems don't start to arise. They'll give you, if you look through his actual book on it, he's got a bunch of, there's a few different drawings of different architectural designs, different blueprints, where you get to this kind of setup. And largely, correctional facilities are set up this way by default. Technologies come in and make it a lot easier. Oh, is there a question? It fixed itself. Can't hear you really too well. Fixed itself. Yeah, the connection can be spotty, so hopefully that's not going to be an issue. But if it starts getting real bad, let me know. Okay, so Bentham's probably the earliest that you'll see that stuff start to come up with. But really, what happens is in the early 1970s. This is the 1800s, 1970s. We'll say it's between 71 and 73. Two big books come out. There's a lot of other works too, but the two big books that came out are one by C. Ray Jeffrey and another one by Newman. Oscar Newman? I think his first name is Oscar. I think this one was in 73, and this one was in 71 or 72. I can't remember. This one came out about a year earlier, but both of them were very, very much the same. C. Ray Jeffrey's textbook, was literally titled Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design. Newman's was Defensible spaces. Right, and so both of them are talking about the same kinds of things. You know, how how the environment influences people and how we can change the environment to address crime. Right, the tenets across the two are heavily overlapped. It's one of those things that's kind of interesting that you'll see commonly within this field, because it's kind of a small field, that the ideas that are emerging emerge across multiple people simultaneously. And so it's really hard. That's also one of the reasons why I say, you know, don't get too caught up in the names of people whenever you see their citations, their publications. They're important, but they're always secondary to the actual ideas themselves. Because like I said, multiple people were developing this at the same time. I want to say this textbook focuses more on Newman than Jeffrey. And so I think we'll pick up there. I was actually looking because I have somewhere copies of both of those. I just can't find them. And I don't know if that was one whenever I moved here, I left it somewhere else or what. But we'll talk about those, their elements, how those things work related to the other stuff we've been talking about. And then we get through that, we'll start moving into systems. Okay. So. Let's see. We'll start with the textbook stuff, probably not. We'll start with the stuff. Okay, so new. There were a number of facets that his book focuses on. I want to say that there are 4 that they really key into, and those are going to be territoriality. Let's see. Image. What else was that? I should remember these off the top of my head. I don't. Surveillance and environment. We'll start with those 3. The environment was kind of a catch-all. Okay. Whenever we see the phrase territoriality, what do you think we mean? Okay. Give me more water and energy drink than caffeine and the coffee. Okay, I don't know. I feel like I'm getting hydrated when I'm drinking this, even though I'm probably not. Okay, so territoriality. Okay, think about animals. Just kind of a rural community. Animal husbandry, anybody have any experiences with that? Good, that's a hard discussion to bring up for this one. Funny one though, because it does have some bearing on this. If you do have much experience with farm stuff or animal husbandry, a very common thing, if you're trying to mate species, mate animals, you move the female to the male and bring the female into the male's territory, not the male into the female's territory, because the male will feel weaker, won't reproduce. You bring the female into the male's territory, he won't have that. They have that reality. They will reproduce, right? So right off the bat, there's something going on in the territoriality for animals too, right? So we start dealing with here is something along the lines of ownership of an area. How do you tell if an area belongs to somebody or doesn't? And so this is one of those questions where you start getting into, you know, some of that individual versus aggregate stuff in terms of, yeah, start thinking about individuals, group dynamics, and then group dynamics at you know, your neighborhood level kind of thing. And so ownership is going to be a big aspect of that. I'm going to high detail on this right now. Maybe I do. So whenever I say ownership, how can you tell if an area If a community takes ownership of an area, how can you tell? Okay. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's hard. It's one of those things I'm gonna use,
Would it be like, oh, I'm sorry.
no, come on in, yeah.
Would it be like that, you know, a community has taken, or people have taken over community and it's like their culture starts being embedded into the community?
Yeah, you're starting to get there. We start getting into cultural stuff, right? You can tell whenever you enter into a new area if there's a cultural change just by looking at the houses, just by looking at their upkeep, by looking at the neighborhoods themselves, right? Some areas do this quite directly, some do it more indirectly. I don't want to say unwillingly, because it's not unwillingly, unintendingly. It's like, let's say you're driving through Tulsa, and all of a sudden you hit a neighborhood and got more bars in the windows. All of a sudden, I'm noticing every single house here has bars in the windows, right? You've just felt a significant shift in the level of maybe danger where you're at, or something about where you're at right now. You've certainly taken notice that something's changed here, right? That level of ownership is one of those things you can be part of that change. Probably the best areas where I've seen it are bigger cities. They'll actually put out things like those little stanchions to notify. It's like, this is the such and such neighborhood. They'll actually have named neighborhoods within a city, and they'll actually go through and they will mark those areas off so people recognize it. If you drive into a certain district, you start seeing signs for that little community, that neighborhood. By doing that, you show that sign of community ownership, that territory. You've now entered into our space, our collective space, not your own, not some public space that no one's really maintaining. No one's watching. Ownership. Someone's here, someone cares, right? Usually we talk about this in the inverse, usually on the policing side, that's your broken windows policing. You'll see that they'll kind of tie into that some across these chapters, because that's kind of the inverse of this. You know, on one side, you have everything, every sign that says no one cares, you can get away with it. This is the sign on the other end. It's like, hey, we're here, we're paying attention, that kind of thing. Just like surveillance, whenever I say surveillance, what do I mean there? Are we actually watching? Right? Are we watching? Are we able to watch? Right? That's a big thing. And so, go right back to that panopticon. Right? Underlying principle there was I can see everything from a one position. Right? If I'm trying to protect something, the more I can see, the better it is. Same thing with surveillance, right? How you design the environment drastically affects what people see and what you see. You know, in terms of like functional things, the book will recommend be like, okay, where do you put your houses on the actual, their plots? What's their orientation? Where are they oriented to? Are there main entryways facing the road that itself is out in front of your house? Is it something where they're turned? And realize that where people are watching tends to be a little bit more safe because people realize that someone's watching. In terms of the inverse of that, sight lines. Has ever heard that phrase before? Sight lines. Basically, if I'm standing somewhere, how clear is it I can see around me, or my lines of sight blocked in certain places? As that level of obscurity increases, crime's going to go up to some degree, because if I can get to some place where you can't see me, my opportunities for crime increase. Two, my level of fear. Fear is a big one throughout a lot of things, because fear can have massive effects. Here, it's like, okay, to show a little bit of the nature, how nuanced this can be. I'm walking across campus at night, and you know, this path has a whole bunch of shrubbery on one side and maybe some other areas where there's good little pockets where people could hide back out of sight as you're walking this path. So you never know if anyone's actually there. It's like, in one sense, like, okay. I can't see much. What is hiding there? There's the opportunity for things to hide. Fear goes up. Your crime's gonna go up. That kind of stuff's the inverse. Surveillance works that way. Territoriality is the same way. All these things affect fear of crime just as much as crime, probably fear of even more. We move to image. Image is gonna be everything it sounds like. What does it look like? Basically what they're starting to talk about this, we usually put this one lower. Stigmas that are attached either to an area that's having crime problems or stigma that might be attached to your intervention efforts. Right? How this stuff ends up working is very, very difficult. You have to be very careful with the messages that you send because you can unintendingly send a message you don't want to, right? Let's say you have that issue with something on campus. Let's say it's the parking lots. That all of a sudden a lot of cars start getting burglarized. We're gonna put up some fences around the parking lots, right? That'd be one of the things you could do to start reducing their ability to get in there. One of the things that's gonna affect the image of the parking lot. What kind of fence did you use? Is it a prison fence? Right? This 20-foot fence with razor wire at the top. It's like, what message did you just send? How bad is that crime? Right? And so those are all things you have to consider. It's always something where there's two sides to the coin, and if you're not very careful with how it's presented to the public, the messages they get from it will be quite different. Let's see here about environment. Tying locations together to improve it. They kind of go into a larger one. It's like in terms of overall design. In his book, one of the things he was suggesting was related to public housing. Public housing. Everyone knows what that does to people's satisfaction if they live in the area, right? They're not happy about that. Can bring in crime, those types of things. You're going to have to address issues like that. Where would you place public housing? Well, one of his propositions was you place it near safe areas. You put it where it's juxtaposed between those areas that are better controlled. So that way the control of those areas diffuses its benefits off into those areas. However, you still have that political element that you still have to contend with. Okay, that kind of goes through Newman. Jeffrey goes a little bit more in detail. So he covers territoriality as well, image, surveillance. We'll also talk about things like and there's more than just this. These are just kind of the big ones. So once you move beyond Newman and you get into Jeffrey, you'll erase some of this stuff. All right, yeah. Territorial image surveillance. You also have things like access control. Defensible spaces, we'll talk about that some too, but it won't do it. Jeffrey's. Yes. How do you gain access to a location? How do you control it? That kind of stuff. You'll also have surveillance activity support. Where else? Image management, that's going to go under manage. And then some target hardening things as well. Okay. Access control is pretty straightforward. Activity support. What they mean by that is finding ways to facilitate legitimate activities within areas that are experiencing crime problems. Reason, why would you want to increase the number of people in an area where there is crime taking place?
Reduce it.
It will reduce it. right? Those are the two big ones that also go into image too, because you start seeing more people in the area, you start feeling safe. So all these things start feeding off into each other. All of these things are connected. It'd be like saying, as you try to target, harden your targets, what's gonna end up happening is that's gonna affect the image. That's also going to maybe increase surveillance. That one has a little bit, the activity support side has a little bit of a question in because the overall problem is that we have a problem with people committing crimes. And one of the ways that we address it is to increase the number of people who are watching crimes. And so, kind of a double-edged thing right there where it's, whether or not you have people who will actively, engage in those things, actual guardianship, right? So we're tie this into routine activities theory, crime pattern theories, or any of that. So they start talking about guardianship and those types of things. This built off of that, but it gets more specific into it. And that's one of the things that's really cool about the crime prevention for environmental design is you start getting into practical applications very, very quickly. Let's see what the book says now, and then I'll tell you some stories. Okay. Design crime in the built environment. There's little empirical evidence to suggest the prevention of child sexual exploitation, homicide, and trafficking could be prevented using measures outlined in the chapters, in this chapter. It starts out talking about that because most of the crimes that we're dealing with here are basically crimes of theft. The low level property crimes, the small things that there's so much of. And so if you start thinking about the small stuff we deal with, does it really affect the serious stuff that's much more rare? Well, that's a big, big question because to some degree, just like whether you're talking broken windows or anything of that nature, that those signals to some degree cause more crime to cluster in those areas. But at the same time, we're really just addressing one of those types of crimes. Some of those types of crimes we're not addressing at all. And so, have some consideration for how you're using this and for what. It has better purposes for your lower level crimes or crimes of theft than some of these other ones. That's not saying you can't do it, it's just easier for that. The risk of becoming a victim of crime varies dramatically based on a person's age and socioeconomic status. This gives you in the second paragraph, it starts identifying basic control variables that have significant relevance across almost all things. All right, that moves into a little bit about the calculations involved. Risk to be calculated, accident to be avoided rather than moral aberration, which needs to be explained. That's crime. Many of the risks, particularly relating to burglary, vehicle crimes, stuff like that. To a large extent, the design and layout of housing developments are a key factor, right? Basically, what they're starting to talk about there, eraser. Talked a little about this before. Journey to crime research. Right, there's a lot of research that will identify, offender's location, home location is X. Crime was at location Y. Here's how far they traveled. And if we do that on aggregate, these are the data on how people move whenever they're leaving their homes to go commit crimes. Right, so you start getting an idea for what that travel actually looks like and how it actually manifests when people decide to engage in criminal activities. Since we're moving through the environment, that's one of the very first things is we can address that journey part pretty easy. Right? Now, first thing he mentioned was where housing projects are located. Because that's going to be people who are vulnerable. Right? Vulnerability, you get crime. And so you have that. Jump in the city planning stuff just yet. There's something wrong with that. Yeah. So here's where you start looking at opportunities. Opportunity to commit crime. It's kind of within people's journeys. Usually what happens is you find out they're not actually journeying to commit crime for the most part. They're just going through their daily travels. As they're going through their daily travels, that opportunity presents itself, then you get the crime. Right? That's really what's going on is it's a crime of opportunity. It's, I was in this area already. I saw that this was an option. I took said option. Opportunity. So it's happenstance, not necessarily people going out with that as their sole purpose. Okay, so we're going to affect this pretty easily. This thing is where you can start pretty easy. That's gonna be your environment. By Ron. Boy, I can't spell today. Meant. There you go. All right, so the environment. Let's say you were having a small issue with car break-ins or something like that, burglaries. You know, what can you do in the environment to start changing how it works? Well, if you're gonna deal with how people move through the environment, how do people move? Question mark. How do you guys get around? Car, what else?
Public transportation.
Some people bike.
Yeah, bike, public transport. Sometimes you walk, right? Those are many ways people get around. We'll start with this one. Okay. City planning. Remember, was this chapter or one of the other three that we had today? There were multiple references to Jane Jacobs' book, Life and Death of the American City. I think it's what it's called. I've got it if anyone wants it. It's a good book because it sets the stage for the septet stuff. Basically, what it starts talking about is, you know, if you want to start affecting these things, the easiest way to do it is start changing the environment. One of the ways that you can do that, well, if you're dealing with cars, we can do street networks, right? It's just in Chicago. Chicago is set up on a grid. You guys aware of that? If you go to Chicago, any of its major roads, at the, the big pole that's got your call out here, whatever direction you're actually on here. There'll be the street name. There'll also be a little number on there. That number will give you the X or Y coordinates for where you're at. And so you literally, okay, this is where I'm at here. The place I'm trying to get, yeah, I've got the roads for it, but I don't know these damn roads. It's about 2,000 numbers higher or lower, okay? It's either gonna be east or west or north or south, right? And so from there, it's really easy to figure out where you're going. Converse side of that is a lot, the street networks look like this. Right? Basic grid. Most streets look like that. It's really easy and it makes a lot of sense to move like that, trying to get somewhere, straight lines. It also makes it very, very easy to get somewhere if you're trying to make a quick getaway. And that's the general idea is the more your roads set up like this, the more familiar your offenders are, the easier it is for them. The easier it is means those numbers go up. And so some of the ways you can address that, you can focus on any one of those elements we had for crime prevention and others that are in the book. From the environmental side, like you can very easily just start changing the road networks a little bit. now it's all broken. Now, if you don't know where you're going, you might end up going straight through or getting redirected out or something like that. The reason you'll find in a lot of cities, particularly big cities, they'll have certain neighborhoods that have very weird street networks like that, is for that specific purpose of confusing you. It's not just that you get confused when you drive in there. They're done like that on purpose. The reason why they're done like that on purpose is so the people who live there can navigate around it. You can't. Right? Because if you can't, that means a stranger coming in there looking to steal my stuff isn't going to stay in there long because they're going to get confused, like, get me the hell out of here. Right? And that is literally what they're going to do. It's like, I absolutely hate this area. Get me out of here. Or they find themselves redirected out of the area through no means of their own. When I was in Little Rock, they've got one of their upscale neighborhoods is like that. You take the main thoroughfare in. If you stay on it, that road literally does this. You drive north and it turns and it goes right back out. And it takes you right out of there. And you got a few roads in through here that are all kind of janky and may not connect in the right kinds of ways. So it's just a mess. They did that on purpose. It's one of the rich areas. Right? Same thing with walking patterns, walking paths. They're very, very nice to have, but at the same time, as nice as they're for you, they're just as nice for criminals. Being able to sort people out, who's who and what's what, is not always easy. And you go right back in that territorial thing. That's one of those aspects that territorial elements keys into is how well can I notice who's in my neighborhood that's from the neighborhood and who isn't, right? You guys live in town. You probably know that already. Who the hell's down my street, right? Like if you don't live there very long, or if you got a very weak social network, people won't know that. They'll just be, I don't really care. Like that whole big city thing. I don't want to get that anonymity. Get that there. That's why essentially what they're trying to do, and to some degree, with that territoriality, is recreate what small towns used to be like. That's literally what they're trying to do. Massive effects. Right? On one hand, if you increase the number of people, it can make it better. If you don't do it right, you're actually increasing the likelihood that you'll be victimized, right? Because you're just increasing the number of people. And so you have to work on multiple of these elements at once anytime you do it. And so it does get complex. Let's see. Move back into this. Design and manipulation of the built environment. Housing estates are designed to limit the likelihood potentials will pass by, vendors will pass by, or they'll become aware of suitable targets for fending. This is achieved through limiting unnecessary movement in the form of, well, they said connecting footpaths. It'll also work for these things too. There are studies that do that. Right? You start changing people's access, those types of things. Change it very quickly. All right. Layout of residential areas also designed to maximize the likelihood you'll be observed. How are those houses in these areas? They're oriented towards the streets. Hey, I'm watching you. That kind of thing. You send that message. Let's see. Formal definition of SEPTED used by Tim Crow. If I remember correctly, I think Crow is the person who authored the Green Books, the Green Book on Crime Prevention through Environmental Design. Have you guys ever seen Green Books before? When I say Green Books, does it sound unfamiliar? I'll show you a picture. Ooh, question you 608, I missed that. Why are they always right on top of each other? Like you can always get back up. My neighbor just a couple blocks away from really good ones. Really, the dynamics there are very, very individualistic. Where you can have good neighborhoods right next to bad. It's like it's no different here in Chicago, New York, or anywhere else. It's the distance there is not much at all. It's gonna have to do with people and how they come together or they don't. It's going to be literally, it will tie back into those group dynamics of territoriality. How strong are the people in those neighborhoods? If you got that one strong asshole who wants to make sure everything's doing all right, constantly on the neighborhood watch. Yeah, sometimes they're a major pain in the backside, but they really are helping out sometimes. And you'll find that in the big cities more, because there's just so much more work to do, kind of thing. Let's see here. What was that? Connecting footpaths, opportunities for surveillance. Definition. I'll show you the Green Book real quick because I'm pretty sure the Crow SEPTED. No, that's not the Green Book. And that's not the exact images. Maybe it'll show me one of the Green Books. We'll see. That's not the right one. There's a series of green books for, a whole bunch of stuff in our field and a bunch of academic stuff in general. Usually you'll find them on statistical methods. Sometimes you'll find them on things that have practical applications. I know I saw it earlier. Was that yesterday? I'll see if I can find a picture of it and send it to you, because green books are very, very helpful. Basically what they do is, some of these books are like stereo directions. Those things are like stereo directions to the nth degree. They take it and they really boil it down. You find them probably most useful if you get into methodology stuff. You really get into it because they'll give you almost like stereo directions for explaining what it is that the analyses are doing, that kind of thing. All right, so formal definition: the proper design and effective use of built environment can lead to a reduction in the fear or incidence of crime and the improvement of quality of life. The goal of CPTED is to reduce opportunities for crimes that may be inherent in the design of structures or in the design of neighborhoods. So there you go. You're starting to get an idea for how encompassing this is. It's not just crime, it's fear of it and quality of life, because those things are going to relate. I haven't talked too much about fear of crime in here, so much as what I'll say is that it has more of an effect than crime itself, because it branches out much, much, much farther. If you start having people withdraw from all of society because they're afraid of crime, it's like that's a lot worse than being victimized. All right, so from there it gives you a couple more definitions, but we'll go with Ekblom's because it's most recent here. Reducing the possibility, probability, and harm from criminal and related events, and enhancing the quality of life through community safety through the process of planning and design of the environment on a range of scales and types of places, from individual buildings and exterior to wider landscapes, interiors to wider landscapes, neighborhoods and cities, to produce designs that are fit for purpose, contextually appropriate in all other respects, and not vulnerability led, whilst achieving a balance between the efficiency of avoiding crime problems before construction and the adaptability of tackling them through subsequent management and maintenance. So that one's really all inclusive, because you're hitting the different venues from it, the different stages of its development in terms of the area itself, and the fact that no matter what you do, you're still going to have some adaptation, because people are still going to try to find a way to do criminal things. That's kind of the nature of the beast there. From there, so research within CPTED has focused on effectiveness of individuals collectively applying principles of CPTED, reducing fear of crime, reducing crime itself, policing, planning environments, prediction and prevention in terms of risks. So that's where we start getting into some of the risk scoring stuff. And environmental and social sustainability. Trying to give you an idea for how far out this branches. It branches from your direct into the crime, to the environment, to design, to architecture, to city planning, to government, right? Branches out the entire way. When you start talking about sustainability and those types of things, you start getting into political waters very, very, very fast. And when that happens, it can be a bad thing, but it can also be a very good thing, because whenever you have those types of things, usually there's funding that's attached, right? How many different types of funding has there been related to sustainability and that kind of stuff? You find ways to angle your research into those areas. You open up more dollars for you if you really want to do that kind of stuff. All right. From there, it says principles of CPTED. Here they give you stuff from Britain. Surveillance, movement control, activity support, motivational reinforcement. Same kinds of things that we're talking about here. Oh, we talked about something that I'd forgotten about. And so movements, access, control are big facets there. You also have legitimate activities, legitimacy we should probably talk about, those types of things. So we'll start with this. Next up, we need to talk about Newman also had a taxonomy for spaces. The space types were private, public, and there are four of them. Private, Is that the week? Yeah. Semi. Private. And then semi. Public. Boop, boop, boop. So those are the four types that we had there, from private all the way to public, or public all the way to private, however you want to look at it. We're gonna have to do with the nature of the area itself, right? Here they said, I give you some examples. Public, the road, semi-public, your garden, the front yard, that's semi-public. Is it protected to a small degree, right? That's gonna be different than like, your back porch, right? Inside your home. Right? And so also realize the nature of this in tandem with things like territoriality, right? Lowest, highest, right? Your highest level of territoriality is gonna be here. That is my home. It's private. Get the hell out, right? This is a public space. You're out of the park. I don't mind not like you, but I still will have to deal with you being out there, right? That kind of thing. All right. Let's see. From there, set that in order, ensure space is clearly demarcated. So that's when we start getting that ownership. You start having some ways to identify if the area actually belongs to someone, whether that's something as simple as upkeep or something as direct as literally flagging the area as belonging to a group kind of thing. It's like the many different ways to do that. But basically the more efforts you put in, just like with any other type of security efforts, the more efforts you put in, all you're doing is reducing the risk, not really anything else. But if you add in enough protections, the likelihood that someone's going to choose someplace else starts increasing. And so the more of these you can stack up, the better. Here it starts talking about offenders. If you're physically blocked, great. If you're not physically blocked from entering an area, the idea is to convince you that you're crossing a boundary into a private space. Why? Because the closer you get to that private space, the more ownership people are going to pick up on, right? You start feeling like you don't belong there. You guys ever been driving, you get lost, you pull into a cul-de-sac and you feel like you need to get the hell out of there fast. Yeah, this is not my area. I need to get out here. I don't like being in here. I feel like people are watching. It's like that feeling you get when you get the hair standing up on the back of your neck, like someone's looking at you. It's like you just know it. You don't like it. It's like, I don't like it. Yeah, and so that's part of it. So there's that tangible and the intangible side of it too. So you kind of have to figure out what's driving that intangible feeling that makes people want to feel uncomfortable or like they can't get away with stuff. And then use that to either flush out the crime or flush people out, that kind of thing. In fact, when you start looking at the research here that they've got outlined, and this is good research, they start identifying that fact quite clearly. Here it says, between 1983, 2006, it's just a few articles we're looking at houses that should have, houses that experienced burglaries and those that didn't. Those that experienced more burglaries, it's like, not only did they have fewer things like fences and stuff like actual barriers, but the symbolic ones where you start sending these types of messages. Yeah, those weren't there. Those messages weren't there. So as you reduce that nature of ownership, territoriality, it's like that opportunity for crime starts increasing as people feel like no one's watching. Here it gives you some more research where it shows whether you're dealing with, this one I think only presents it on the side of offenders, where they interviewed offenders and they showed them pictures of different neighborhoods, different houses, and said, okay, rate these to tell us which ones you break into, right? And they'll tell you, and then they'll identify why. And you'll see that's like the same characteristics they're looking for. I'll put it this way. Judging from pictures, which properties would be more vulnerable to burglary, Results revealed that property showing signs of territorial behavior, such as gateways at the front of property, signs or doors marking the area as private, were perceived as less vulnerable to burglary. Right? Offenders picked up on it. People living in the area, they pick up on it too. They feel safer. That kind of thing. Yeah. One example I gave, I'm being shown an image of a cul-de-sac with a narrowing at the entrance. So not only is it a cul-de-sac, they actually made the road become more narrow at the end. So you feel like you're really getting trapped in. Offender 3 stated, people living here will have a bee in their bonnet. This is a private road for private people. I'd feel awkward here. It's all about the bluff and I couldn't pull it off here. The bluff being, can I slide in here undetected? Right? You have a lot of transiency in an area. The opportunity for me to slip in undetected and get away with something without you noticing is extremely high. This gets you away from that transiency, right? It's also why if you look at things like, whether you're talking social disorganization theory, you'll see residential stability as a common aspect of it, or if you talk about stability in general, start getting into this kind of stuff. Okay. Limiting through movement. Offender selects targets that increase likelihood of a war, reduce risk of being caught, then they'll select targets with easy access and escape routes. So that's one of the first things you want to look at to start reducing the suitability of targets. You're tying back into the routine activities theory. Okay. But also reduce the likelihood of an offender will make the rational choice. The target will offer more risk. In the case of SUPDED, housing design movement refers to the presence of formal or informal footpaths. It's like, that's one thing, whether you're talking alleys, whether you're talking sidewalks and those types of things. It can increase transiency. Do it with roads too. And let's see what's next. The dominant reason offenders would give for selecting a particular target, chance, right? So if you think back to some of the theories we dealt with earlier in the semester, like crime pattern theories, the nodes, and how people move through the environment. All this lines up with that as well. It's that just as we're moving through the environment, as that chance pops in, there'll be those who take it. And so you start with that one. Let's see. Next bit of research was home to work travel paths and relationship to crimes. Ease and access and egress. This allows primary given chance. All right, lost my spot here. Okay, here we go. We start seeing a little bit of the nuanced nature of it. Okay, so access is one aspect of it. Footpaths, that kind of those types of things. It's not just that it's the transiency, it's that it legitimizes seeking behaviors, searching behaviors. If I'm out on foot and I'm walking around looking around, that's a normal thing because there's a sidewalk there and people do that, right? Your ability to blend in massively increases. Talk about legitimate behaviors. When we talk about legitimate behaviors, in here, legitimacy is its own subject area. Usually you see it most often in policing, and that has to do with, you know, if you view the police as a legitimate force, you'll submit to their requests kind of thing. It also has to do with attitude source policing. But legitimacy more in general just has to do with, you know, the authority one has to take any specific action at any point in time. In this case, we're talking about walking on footpaths, right? That's a public place that no one has specific ownership of. That means you can't kick somebody off of it, even if it's in your own front yard. Right? So that's what they start talking about. It's that opportunity for legitimate activity, which we do want to increase because we like having people around, also offers that negative opportunity there. Whole yin yang thing, that one dark spot in that white area. Okay. All right. From there, it says neighborhood permeability and is one of the community level designs most reliably linked to crime. Can you move in and out? Movement inside within residential housing increases the risk of crimes. And it's one of those things that there is that paradox we identified earlier. With more people, you get more surveillance, but also you get that nature of more opportunity, more potential offenders. Okay, surveillance, you know what that means in terms of, yeah. there anything I want to say about surveillance and studied impact of movement from burglary? Risk of burglary is greater on major roads than those intended to be, greater on major roads. Basically, I think we talked about this stuff already. You look at street networks, the amount of traffic that's there, the amount of people moving through the area, has a massive effect on your ability to get in and out. It's also why if you look at houses on the corners, they are more frequently burglarized than houses in the middle of blocks. It's the same aspect of access and, well, escape and that transient nature. Since you have so many different points where people are moving, it's much easier to get in and get out without being noticed. Here it mentions also the risk of burglary lower in cul-de-sacs, anything with non-linear or non-integrated into wider road networks. That's what I was drawing over here before. You start breaking it off from the rest of the road networks from the city, becomes more isolated onto an island itself. If you do that, crime drops precipitously. And from a personal experience, I could talk to you about my last university was 260 acres in the middle of Little Rock, right? You can literally chart out all the crimes in the areas around it, surrounded by a sea of yellows and reds, right? In terms of hotspots for crime. You look at the campus itself, it is solid white with very little crime because of the fact all of its road networks had kind of been cut off except for like 2 or 3. And then the rest of the area is just for students. So if you're not in on foot, you're not getting through campus, and most of the crime in Little Rock is on vehicle. That kind of thing. You don't have too many people walking on foot to go do a shooting. They're going to be doing a drive-by, that kind of thing. And so you can see quite clearly how it has very, very real, very direct effects. Here, next up. Several studies also highlighted movement as a criminogenic feature in the production of crime risk assessment measures. So it's that movement. Okay, talk about sight lines. We already talked about that. Visibility, we talked about that. Okay. So when we start talking about preferences for crimes, the area looks like it's not owned, like there's unoccupied. Is there anything in there that's suitable for taking? That kind of stuff. Here. Most commonly referred feature of target attractiveness was the degree of cover. Following that, it was whether the property was unoccupied, and then if both of those look to be yes, usually what they would do after that is knock or ring doorbell to check, right? And so there's a process there. Okay. Okay. One study dealing with surveillance and crime risk actually found something kind of interesting here, and I underlined it. Surveillance from neighboring properties appeared to reduce crime risk, yet surveillance from the road or footpath enhanced a property's risk of crime. That's kind of interesting there, because what it's saying there is those who, you're tying it into potentially that sense, that ownership, right? The relationship between people who are watching each other versus trying to watch those open areas kind of thing. I'd love to delve back in that one because that was kind of interesting. Next it mentions the Delft checklist. This is a checklist for measuring the risk of crime. You'll have different ways you can identify risks here. Here, of the factors they identified as predictors for risk of crime, surveillance and visibility are the biggest ones, right? Visual contact between buildings, amenities outside spaces, sight lines between buildings, and adequate levels of lighting. Yeah. I'm going to talk about that. Visibility. Right. So, is an area being watched, and what can you see? Right. Close, but 2 different concepts. Make sure to keep those straight if you try to use those for anything. Basically, what I want to say about that is visibility is a bigger term. It's more about the effects it has on those who are watching. This is more about the effects of those who are being watched, right? If I'm watching something, I see something I like, that visibility of it will have a very positive effect. Visibility will also come up with officer patrols. Right here, you start doing officer patrols and put them in public places with large amounts of people. That visibility element will go way up. The efforts that you're taking, are you making them visible? Sometimes you want to, the officer thing, sometimes you don't, right? And sometimes, and that's gonna deal with that image aspect of it. Okay. Lighting. No, I won't get into that. That'd be a research project. All right. Next up. Difference between predicted and potential surveillance, that actually takes place. So the ability for a place to be surveilled versus what it actually is. Guardianship intensity. There's a section where it talks about guardianship intensity. So we talked about guardianship before. You can see where they start to delve into that a little bit. And they've got 4 stages on there. 1, invisible. No evidence that the area is even occupied. 2, available guardian. Evidence the property is occupied. 3, capable guardian. Field workers are observed by residents. And basically, you have someone who's a capable guardian. Stage 4, intervening guardian. That would be anyone there would be challenged by residents. So basically, do you see them, and would they stop you and ask you who you are? That kind of thing. At each stage for that level of guardianship, crime is going to decrease. The more interventions, the more ability that people have to intervene. The desire to, it will increase. Physical security, that's where they start talking about target hardening. That's gonna be things like locks, gates, those types of stuff, anything to make it more difficult. Here mentions physical structures, fences, and anything that's gonna increase the difficulty for someone to enter a building or space. That access control. Okay. There. Next thing it talks about in terms of alarms. Burglar alarms. Ooh. Depending on how I approach this, sometimes I bring in signs to see what you like more. Alarms. Most people are aware of alarms, right? Car alarms. What do you guys do when you hear a car alarm?
Look to see where it's at or what, someone breaking in or something.
Do you do anything?
A tipsy is my car.
That's kind of what I was thinking. None of my cars have alarms. I don't care. Yeah, and so that's exactly one of the other things that goes along with this. You have to realize that for any of the efforts that we take, if there's something that's long gauged enough, that there's enough familiarity with, at some point people stop paying attention. Fear is an alarm bell for us, that kind of thing. And it used to be those car alarms would set people off. They'd go out and immediately go see what's going on. It doesn't do that. House alarms are a lot the same way. That'd be like saying fire alarms here on campus, right? Because every campus is going to have a massive amount of false alarms. Popcorn. Just popcorn will do that, right? After enough of those, people stop paying attention, right? At that point in time, those efforts have no effect whatsoever. It kind of talks about that a little bit when it starts talking about car alarms. So that offenders not deterred by the presence of alarms, suggesting that, basically, none of them would stop them. And as soon as they start hearing alarms, so most of them, if you tear them off the wall, they stop working. And so if they're still annoying and shit after that, then they'll usually leave and leave alone, but it's more about the annoyance stuff. Yeah. Does it have an effect?
They did fire drills too.
Yeah, fire drills, yeah. That's another one. People don't know if the fire alarm's an actual fire alarm or if it's a drill or not. And so what ends up happening when the alarm goes off, did someone fiddle around and pull the alarm? Is it a drill where I don't need to do that? Or is this a real thing? And usually what ends up happening, if there's a real fire, a lot of the time people end up sitting on their asses right there as the alarm's going off. You don't hear that all that stuff going on, you're just sitting there typing away. Like, yeah, the building is on fire. We need to go now, right? I've had that happen before at other jobs. It's like, yeah, guys, that alarm going on. I'm going outside. I mean, if you really want to keep working, I really don't care about anything in here. I'm leaving. Yeah, it's like, yeah. It's something you have to give it the respect it's due. Let's see, image management. Here's where it talks about the stigma and poor social reputation. Where that comes in the most part, it's gonna be your low-level vandalisms and, things like, mentioned tagging, graffiti. Biggest thing for it is understand what it is and what it does, right? If you understand why a crime is being committed, if you can destroy its purpose, then it stops. Graffiti is one about people's names. I put my name out there. I put my artwork out there, I get noticed, right? That's the whole idea of graffiti. What do they do as a result? It took them a few years to figure it out, a couple decades back. As soon as we have graffiti happen somewhere, you get that stuff off there immediately. And guess what? The less amount of time it's on there, the less likely it is that someone's gonna pop up and do it again because they put in all that effort and got them nothing, right? You look at the taggers, basically that they make a game of it. The more difficult it is, the bigger it is, and the more dangerous it is to put it somewhere, the more respect it's earned, right? You do all that work and you get nothing out of it, it's a waste. They won't do it anymore, and it works. Let's see here. Image management, broken windows is basically what they're talking about there with image management. It also mentions physical incivilities. Basically, anytime you see the phrase incivilities, you're talking about some of those low-level things like what you'd see in social disorganization theory. It's a real close correlate to it. Broken windows kind of stuff too, where it's like the low-level stuff that's mild irritants, whether you're talking about the low-level incivilities like this person's using their front yard as a parking lot, that kind of thing, to other aspects that key into the nature of the neighborhood community. And so if you see that phrase, that's what it's talking about there. Physical incivilities indirectly influence people's perceptions of risk in an area that includes offenders. So the more run down an area looks, the more disorganized it looks, the more likelihood that it is to be victimized, to be targeted. Okay. Elderly residents, convicted burglar. Okay. Yeah. Any place that's well maintained will be identified as the safest of places. So if you can tell an area is well maintained, yeah, its safety ratings are gonna be higher. Its value is gonna be more. Its actual dollar figure will be more. Okay. The next part, it talks about CPTED in practice for that chapter. We don't need to go into practice because we've been talking about it directly. Okay. The next section talks about leaky systems. And so I'll talk about this in general first, because you need to understand how systems work. Now, you have a CJ system class that you've probably taken at some point. What did that focus in on? Oh.
I mean, the overall system itself.
Yeah, there's three of them. Police, courts, corrections. Right? Each of those is its own system, but we call that overall the criminal justice system, right? When we use the phrase system, probably a better one would almost be something along the lines of maybe organization, institution, entity, things like that. Because anytime you're dealing with any type of group, itself is a system, right? Any organization will run like a system. Whether you're talking about a university, a small business, anything like that's going to have the same kind of flow to it. Here, let's see what this says. Gives you a whole bunch of systems here. Okay. System refers to a present purpose to any set of organized or consciously developed habitual human behaviors. System attributes are intentionally and knowingly created, even though they may produce unintended consequences. Same objective may be pursued with different system attributes that bring with them different unintended consequences. So what's talking about here is no matter what any of these things do, it's going to take a very specific set of actions to try to do it. Do those actions take them to the goal, maybe yes or no.
Mhm.
And then what else does it do? Because it's not just gonna do that, right? You ever had anything like a policy analysis or a project, was it program evaluation, policy analysis, those types of things? They build off of the same kind of process, because what they do is you're taking the same scientific method and trying to figure out if they're actually doing what they're supposed to do. Okay. If you really want to get into it, actually, I won't get into that just yet. We'll see what this thing does, and I'll get into that. All right, so examples of systems that you will have been involved with. Healthcare, education, banking. Let's see what else they give. They're gonna go a whole long list here. I'm just gonna do big ones. Educational welfare, of course, criminal justice system, vehicle registration, postal systems, public transport, financial control, social networking, online auction systems. All of these things are different systems. Reasons why they're systems is because they operate, right? If it's something that operates, question is how. Once you figure out how it operates, you figure out how the system is supposed to work. You can now fix it. Right? Remember when we were here, was it 2 weeks ago now, 3 weeks ago? Where I was talking, maybe it's 4 weeks ago, when we were talking about inductive reasoning. You start out with the why, then it's the how, then you get everything else, right? So we have systems. We also have a lot of life that's unstructured. Book points this out and says, much systematic behavior is relevant to crime opportunities and crime patterns. For example, it says holidays, bar hopping, things like that. There's a lot of criminal activity associated with those things. It's not necessarily going to key over into this, but much is actually structured, right? One argument is that any class of system developed to the same purpose, there's often variations in design. And so as a result, some of these systems, we'll say, they call it weak, but it's probably better to think about it in terms of that same permeability or transiency that we were just talking about, right? As people are moving through neighborhoods and it creates crime, that transiency, that flow through allows for crimes. In the systems itself that we use, you have opportunities for leaks to be sprung where criminal activities can take place, right? Where there's some breakdown. And so you get those leaky systems, right? As is kind of what they're trying to say there. Then, if evidence were found to support this hypothesis, the frequency of crime occurrence per system when plotted against crime rank would conform to the widely observed J curve. What are they talking about there? That's that thing again. When you look at the number of buildings or the types of systems or whatever it is, you're going to see that a very small number is gonna have most everything. Right, it's gonna have that same kind of concentration there. And so, how variations in the system might inadvertently produce crime is neglected in this topic. So, how these systems inadvertently lead to crime. That's gonna be here, unanticipated stuff is not something that's widely addressed in terms of the research. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that this area, there isn't much research?
Maybe a lack of interest.
Lack of interest, yeah, that's a definite part of it. Okay, so let's talk about that one for a second. interest. Why no? You're right. There are plenty of people that are gonna be involved with these systems that will have no interest at all in delving into research on this topic or even in delving into the topic itself. Do you know why? From the outset, this one introduces a very serious potential for that right there, harm. Okay? I'll give you an example. This thing starts talking about organized crime related to these things later in this chapter. What I'll say is ransomware attack. You guys know what ransomware is, right? All of a sudden, your entire computer system is frozen. Everything is locked. You're a healthcare provider. This has happened recently, right? Your system is completely locked and everyone's life is dependent on you getting this information back as quickly as possible. The people who've locked your stuff away, they want, we'll say, I don't know, 125K. Pick your amount, because it doesn't really matter when you start delving into this stuff. It's permanent, right? However much it is. What do you do? Yes, you can't do your job if you don't get that information. Those lives are dependent on you. It's gonna cost some money to do it. But you get back going pretty quick. You're still vulnerable to the same damn thing. More often than not, they pay it. And they don't say anything because if people found out there was that kind of breach that took place, guess what they're not going to do? They're not gonna use your institution again, right? They're gonna move away. Whether it's the next hospital that's a little bit more secure, or whether it's the next banking organization that's not going to take those actions, or what, right? They do not want to disclose that information for the harm it does to the image of the organization itself. And so, from the outset, a lot of the people who should have the most interest in it will not. Okay. That's kind of a sad one, right? Next one. Why is it still so difficult to get in there? These systems tend to be relatively closed in nature, right? You're in the system or you are not. They tend not to let those from outside look in. Which is why one of the big recommendations for stuff like this is always to have oversight committees or outside entities that take a look and that kind of stuff. Right? Two big reasons. Right there why it's so hard. Third one, when you get to the actual criminal activity, those who are actively doing it, of course, they won't have any interest in it coming to light because they have been directly involved. That's to say that that's just kind of the nature of crime. Anyone who's engaging in criminal activity tends to want to hide that from anyone who would look to find out because they want to continue in that normal activity. All right. And that kind of gives a little bit about that. You also have the unanticipated effects, unintended effects, where you have your original purpose and then you have everything else that you do. So every organization, ideally it will go after its sole purpose, its primary purpose, but that's not always. I think we'll come back to that one in a second, see what this thing moves into first. Okay. Range of this chapter is as follows. Next section suggests 9 ways configuration systems might facilitate crime, followed by how it can reduce crime. Okay. What on? Yeah, we'll go with the book and I'll take and break it down if you're actually having to do this. This, that, Okay. You have your organization, your entity, whatever. Here's how it can do it, okay? Unintentionally, it can create crime. It just lists several ways in which this they can be conducive to crime. The following examples is each case, a specific system was well intentioned, but developed to meet specific needs, specific purposes, but it can also do this thing. Systems can furnish rewards for crime, meaning that it can provide incentives for criminal behavior. Here it starts talking about different sides of the border has for hundreds of years provided rich rewards for smuggling goods. Not a single system, but presence of more than one and different rates and different opportunities to traffic. Explain why that they might do something like that. Here, what it says, furnish rewards for crime. It's like, just think about all the different ways that one can be rewarded for criminal actions within organizations. Now, some of them are even legitimized. Depending on what system you're looking at, who's doing it, who's what, and whether or not the organization itself is corrupt. And that's what you start getting into. It's like, it's the reason why if you watch, good example, Rittenhouse. You guys saw that trial a couple years back? That sounds familiar?
Yes,
Guy
yes.
shot, killed one, shot two or three, can't remember. Anyhow, ruled self-defense. In the trial itself, the prosecutor, one, violated Brady. That's a huge no. Two, called into question the defendant's invocation of the Fifth Amendment. That's a big issue, right? But just between those two rules, the Brady violation alone should have had that person disbarred. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. One. That thing is corrupt. That's why nothing happened. Okay. Can it refer to reward for crime? Yeah. If they'd have won that case too, even with those violations in place, what would have happened? Big fat raise. That happens. Okay. Can make crime easy. Can facilitate crimes. Yes. Depending on how we set things up, crimes are very easily facilitated. Whether it's something like no one's watching, you get away with it. That's a common one. The example it gives you here is about gas stations in is it Britain? Yeah. Basically what it's done is in the last couple decades, probably before your guys' time, you guys probably don't remember gas station attendants, do you? Okay, you're not that. Damn. I do a little bit. It was very common for a lot of gas stations to have gas station attendants. Up north, it's still a common thing for people not to know how to pump their own gas, even in the car. It's one of the rare exceptions. The way northeast, where it's really high population density, a lot of people don't know how to work the pump.
Isn't there a law in a specific state that it's illegal to pump your own gas or?
Yeah, there's some laws about that. Some states you can't. Some, I want to say there's one state where you can't. That everything is serviced like that. But I don't know if they have any other direction. I'm not looking into it that much. One of those things that just boggles my mind that someone would know how that works. It's like, but that's true. In those changes they had over in Britain, what they had is they moved away from attendance. Now it's all remote. And then guess what happens? Oh, my card didn't read, and I'm just going to take off. Right? And then you got to drive away kind of thing. Usually where it happens, like in businesses, is someone starts falling down on the job and isn't doing their job at all in terms of watching whatever it is that's of value with that organization. I can tell you where I've seen it in higher education. I can tell you where I've seen it in other places. That oversight's a big kind of effect on it. Can make crimes less risky. That's how a system can also do it. The risk of being detected is influenced by, well, the difficulty it takes to look, right? As I was talking, it starts talking about audits right there. Okay. How difficult is it to get someone to take that time to look? The cost, that kind of thing. It is, system accounting does not routinely include independent audit experts for reasons of cost, efficiency, and so forth, all of which would lower the likelihood that you might have things like embezzling, right? All right. When I finish this up, I'll go into the story and I'll tell you guys that one. I'm gonna call it after that. This one goes on for a bit. Okay. Next one. Oh, this is on the same one. Crime less risky. A recent high-profile example in the Parliament, so this is Britain again. Parliamentary Expenses scandal exposed in Britain 2009. Publication of parliamentarian allowances and expenses revealed widespread abuse in the form of false excessive expense claims carried out on the assumption the claims were rarely, if ever, queried. No one was watching, so everyone was emptying out the coffers into their own damn pockets again. Sort of like when they realized that they can vote themselves raises. They do. When they did that and they started doing that, society went downhill, right? Here, we've had similar instances in a number of different fronts. Just in the last few years, I can tell you about the same time frame. It would have been 2009, been more like 2000 and somewhere between 2010 and 2013. Arkansas had a major issue with people using official use vehicles, right? Think of every incentive, every little, I don't know, check mark that someone gets for a job. Those little incidental things that they like. Some of them aren't so incidental. You get up to a certain level within administration, whether it's this organization or any other type of organization, no, just higher ed, but any organization, they start layering on those incentives to really get you in. They start negotiating with you in ways that I wouldn't really think are moral, but that's a different discussion. One of the things that they would do is, last university was, if you were a direct report to the chancellor kind of thing, so basically anything between number 2 and number, I think 15, because he had about 15 of them. Nearly all of them had a university vehicle given to them. Here you go, here's a car. You never have to worry about paying for gas. Here's a gas card to go with it. The university pays for it all. And you just get to drive that thing wherever the hell you want. It's a monthly allowance. Use it for whatever the hell you want. And so what ended up happening is people are abusing the shit out of it, right? We've got reports that there's the same university vehicle has been visiting this retirement center, that's about 100 miles out of the way, 3 or 4 times a month, right? We're seeing this guy coming here a lot. This is just one of them. And this is just one of the people who's using these areas, these types of vehicles in this way. Massive abuses, because you're talking about hundreds of thousands of miles in the course of just a few years, right? A lot of mileage on a vehicle, stuff adds up real fast, costs money, gas goes up. What ends up happening is you have someone who decides to start auditing that stuff, because it wasn't just universities, it was all governmental positions. Whether it was state, whether it was, the local government, they all had official use vehicles, and they were all abusing it. And so what ends up happening is the system corrected it. They got rid of that. Did it fix the problem? No. What they ended up doing as a result is they got rid of the university vehicles, even the state ones started using them less. What they started doing though is giving them an allowance, a monthly allowance to cover the cost of the vehicle in cash. So they got an extra $700 a month for nothing. Like, yeah, there's some corrupt stuff there, right? It's like, that is not the best use of that thing. You're using that to recruit people into there who should be there for the benefit of the organization. Really what it is, they're there to benefit themselves. You get the wrong kinds of people in there. All right. So that's just one of those examples. I can point out a whole bunch of things like that too. Okay, systems can facilitate crime planning. Okay, so this is where they start talking about the regularity of things. Systems, you use those to the benefit of all, not to your benefit. If you build one, you benefit everyone who's involved in it, not any one party, and definitely don't do it as a zero-sum thing where it benefits some and it is a detriment to others. That's a bit of a different conversation about organizations in general. But with that system is going to come some element of regularity. Right? Book won't talk about it this way. Exactly, but that's what they're talking about. Some regularity with its actions. With regularity, you get predictive ability, right? If I know X happens at this time of year every year, I know that whether it's a report that needs to be filed or whether it's some action that needs to be taken, I can know that this is coming and I can take actions to either make it better or worse, whatever, that kind of thing. with the regularity associated with these organizations, usually you're talking about the relationship between security and those types of things. It's very, very easy to understand that these things work on shifts, right? How hard is it to figure out, okay, this is this person's shift, this is their patrol patterns, kind of things. I don't have to watch very long in an organization to figure out, okay, this mall cop's gonna be in this area at this time on this particular shift. And that means he's not over here at that point in time. So I've got open opportunity to go commit crime. So just like as with our cognitive abilities, we're using those to build something good. You'll have the same people who are doing the exact opposite against you. So you have to keep that in mind as well. Okay. Next up. Also mentions can disinhibit or provoke crime. We've already talked about that. Can generate need. What does it say here? Need relative deprivation may drive some crimes, maybe a function of broader economic systems or more immediate ways which systems can create needs that in turn facilitate crime. I don't like that one. They're giving an example of a system that's put in place to allow for prepayment for gas, that kind of stuff. And when it broke, how it affected the needy more. Because it was breaks and things were breaking more disproportionately in poor areas. Again, you get that concentrated disadvantage coming through there, is what they're saying. Is because we build the systems the way that they do, the areas that are lacking resources tend not to get attention, and that makes it worse. It's basically trying to get across there. Okay, systems can teach crime. Yeah. Here it talks about all the different ways information is passed around. Okay, systems can legitimize crime. Littering. If there's no enforcement of littering, it becomes widespread, that kind of stuff. They're just kind of being back into broken windows theory. How systems intentionally reduce crime. Here's where they make the switch. So if you're going to try to reduce crime, you're going to make it more risky, right? So the punishments associated with it are going to be more severe. Basically, you're kind of seeing that take place in society right now to some degree with reinstitution of a lot of criminal law. So if you took Oregon, for example, drug crimes there. Did you guys see what's happened in the last year? What the effective date is for it, but they passed, originally they had moved away from criminalizing almost every drug that just allow you to use it openly. They've gone back and recriminalized those things because they realize what happens when you don't, right? And so you can increase the level of risk associated with it, but realize that there are a number of ways that we can address that. We can reinstitute laws. Here what they were dealing with, the example I gave you was scrap metal that was being stolen. I'd be like this, okay? We've had issues with copper being stolen from air conditioners and that kind of stuff. Or the platinum stolen from your catalytic converters underneath your car, the mufflers. How we could very quickly address that to where it's not an issue again, what they did. We now require licensing for anyone who's processing this much amount of metal of this type, right? And anyone who's processing that much metal, they need to collect the information from anyone who's bringing in metal, right? So if you're selling off the copper, all of a sudden we got a list of who's selling off copper for how much and at what times. I can very quickly look to see, hey, these numbers kind of get real close to those numbers that were stolen in the same kinds of time frames. And so you start getting real close to being, that's probably the guy who's stealing it. Let's go investigate that guy, right? Criminals are going to know that. They're going to know, hey, if I put my name on that, oh shit, they're going to be looking at me. Okay, that starts to go away. They find a new opportunity, something else to do. All right, systems can make crime more difficult. Here it gives an example of one of the checkbooks was obtained illegally, and then individual checks were being presented fraudulently. You can change the system to require withdrawals from multiple people's identities to be confirmed, all kinds of stuff to add in extra protections. That would be like, say I'm on the board of a charity and there's monies attached to the charity. How many signatures does it take to access those funds? Is it the person who's the treasurer, is it the person who's the president, or are you doing both? That kind of thing. Ideally, probably both would be best. The more difficult you make it to access those funds, the more safe they are, that kind of thing. I'll tell you some stories about that maybe here in a little bit. All right, so it's more difficult. Let's see. So this is to make crimes less rewarding. That's where they start talking about the graffiti artists. You look at what they're actually getting out of what it is that they're doing, and if you can get rid of that purpose, then the crime goes away itself. Next up, systems can reduce crime provocation. Notable example involved reducing the widespread availability of cheap alcohol through special promotions. Special promotions with cut price drinks can lead to the congregation of large numbers of easily provoked inebriates. I love that phrase, inebriates. Yes. Those poison people. They're intoxicated, they've been poisoning themselves. Yeah, so those are some of the things, like if you have a large number of bars in this area, that kind of thing, they're all running specials at the same time. If you go in there and stop them from running specials at the same time, just have a conversation with them about that's something very quickly start to decrease provocation. Here's a venue management task group provides a checklist assessing the policies of each bar covering discounts, happy hours, practices for low and standard pricing. Let's see, serving people who are underage or intoxicated, promotions for the bars, that kind of stuff. Everything from there all the way down to security itself. Okay. Next bullet point says here, systems can remind potential offenders of the rules. Rule reminders prompt potential offenders at the point of offending to be aware they're about to undertake a breach. You know, that's one of those things that you start getting rid of that ability to deny, you know, wrongdoing by offenders. It kind of ties into Sykes and Monson on that one. You know, basically, you know, signs informing customers that proof of purchase would be required for leaving the store. And require proof of purchase to be presented if you returned, proof of personal identity, all that kind of stuff. Handwritten or signed statements, anything that you really start to identify that person, try to get them to take those extra steps. Those extra steps can be enough to dissuade people from doing it. We're good, we're good. Okay. And yeah, and it gives you an example here where they had a series of businesses where they made these changes related to their return goods policies because they were having a lot of shrinkage, people coming in and stealing stuff, coming back and returning it with money. What they did is they started requiring IDs and receipts, and guess what? Your number of crimes drops by almost 90%. You know, the dollar figure drops by 2/3. And so you get to see it has major effects. That kind of thing. And then from there, it starts going off into some other areas where I don't know if I really want to talk about that stuff because it's not so much on topic. Systems. Start talking about online dating and romance and all the online stuff, because that's where most of social networking stuff is crossed. And the fact that it is such a common place for fraud. And so there's a big section in this chapter that talks about fraud and online dating and that kind of stuff, where basically it's something that's a bit different than your standard con man who's trying to get something out of you real fast. It's someone who builds real slow, and they're looking for money lines that they can keep ripping people off for them. Yeah. Okay, so that covers that one. The next one is business crime and crime prevention. 7:10 right now. So I'll open this up for opportunities for question before we move into this next chapter. What do you guys want to talk about? All right, so here's what I'm going to do before I start talking about businesses. I'll tell you how to do it informally before we get into this one. Dealing with any type of organization, any type of institution. When you're having issues, whether you're dealing with issues like this, crime prevention, crime detection, or you're just coming in and trying to figure things out. How do you figure things out? How do you figure a system out? Ideally, okay. Think about any job that you've ever had. Okay. Usually there's some type of training or something like that comes in with that. But assume that that's not there. Let's say you're an outside person trying to figure out an organization. Some of the early things you need to do is find out what types of information are available about the organizations, institutions that are involved. Kind of give you an idea. Ooh, I'll tie it into something you guys might be a little bit more familiar with. If I said HLC, do you know what that means? Ooh, okay, educational ones. So HLC is the Higher Learning Commission. They're the ones that accredit universities, degrees, that kind of thing. So whenever you go and you get a degree, you'll see it says at the bottom of the website, say accredited, that kind of thing. What that means is that if you were to choose to leave here today, tomorrow, that kind of thing, all of the work that you've completed will be recognized at another university, and the value of it is real. And it's essentially what it is. It's not just that you got here, you did your piece of paper, you did the work associated. It's something more than that. You had outside people from other institutions across the country come in every so many years and evaluate the entire institution, right? That's one of the things that they have to do. The process that they go through for doing that is not unlike anyone who's just only entering into an organization, trying to figure it out, or if you're having to assess it or any of those things. So the easiest thing to start out with is finding all available information related to it. And most of that stuff's pretty easy anymore because they'll post that stuff publicly. For example, if I wanted to show you here, I've never actually done this for this university, but I'm gonna do it. Share, we'll say, NSUOK. Okay, future students, you apply, current students, active advising students. Spotlights, nice. Missions, student consumer information, might be under there. Advising college, If not, it might be under about us. Let's try this one first. About us. There you go. Future students. We've provided some information that'll give you a picture of the university. At a glance, our campuses, tours, thank you. Mission, values, vision. Boom. You were asked what a university does into a single sentence. It's right there. Every university will have a mission statement. What is it trying to do? This is our mission. This is where we see it going. Here are the values and how we place them, right? To some degree, it's going to outline, okay, this is our overall goal. Here's how we see doing it. And these are aspects of that, how we start to identify values, priorities, that kind of thing. To some degree, those are going to be the modes through which you actually achieve your goals, kind of thing. You start with this. This is the closest thing you'll get to spirit, right? The spirit of an institution dialed down into a single sentence, kind of thing. Most organizations will have a mission statement, and it's like any organization. Let's see, mission statement for a, we'll say, bank. We'll prefer target, see, stuff like that. You know, some flighty thing that ideally should have some type of measure associated with it, but usually those things are written so flighty, so flowery that it doesn't actually mean anything, right? So if you've had methods, whenever we talk about like program evaluation, that kind of stuff, you probably remember saying it's like, yeah, it's a bunch of bullshit. And most of the time, what they give you is a bunch of bullshit. And you got to figure out, what is it we actually do? That kind of thing. And so you start with the available information and you try to start figuring out what their actual processes are. What is it, you know, that this thing actually needs to do for it to function? From there, you're going to be talking about, okay, you know, maybe what types of positions, people maybe are involved with those processes to get you to whatever that goal actually is, kind of things. You figure out what positions do what in the overall process, you put it into the type of system that it is, right? And so every organization will have people with different positions. That organizational structure is what you start getting here. Org charts are very, very helpful if you have them. So if you're delving into like a system, an organization, institution you're completely unfamiliar with, start looking for mission statements, that kind of stuff to identify goals, organizational charts, so you can see the hierarchy of the organization. Ideally, what you want to get down here are duties, responsibilities, those types of things. As we see what the people actually have to do. You see what they actually have to do. You get an idea for how this thing should actually work. But realize that since this is all based off of information, I should say that this is all hypothetical on this side, because it is. Yes, this is all the stuff that they say that they're doing. Is it anything of what they're actually doing, or is it all just a lie for them to do whatever the hell it is they want to do? Sometimes it's a lie just for them to do whatever the hell it is they want to do, and that's when it's really bad. Here, what you'll find is that those positions and those duties as they're outlined, those things, what you'll see here is, yeah, no, those things don't align at all. The processes as they're supposed to function, maybe they partially do, maybe they don't, and that kind of thing. And so what you end up with is not functioning here, barely functioning here, no oversight here, and then everything goes wild and the organization falls, kind of thing. The book kind of talks about that a little bit. It's like, if you do this massively the wrong way, you do kill the organization, right? Now, if you were to walk into an organization and face something like this, where would you want to be? What position would you want to be in to get it done? That's the pain in the ass. Okay. There is no one good position to be in to address these things. If you do, what you end up with are, well, bottom, middle bottom. We'll just say 3 ways to look at hierarchies in administration, right? Are you on the ground? Are you in the top floor? Or are you somewhere in the middle? Ideally, if you're going to address something that is systematically wrong, maybe systemic is the right word. I have to think about that. Within something like this, depending on how tall that administrative structure is, you might need people at every single level. You don't want to be just here or just here. Those are bad positions, right? Down here or up here, you can be a scapegoat, very, very easy, right? It's not that you're identifying the problems, you are the problem, get you out of there, right? No, that's not it at all. You might be trying to fix something, right? Do you have that support? If the whole thing's corrupt, you won't get it, right? You get some support though. At any other level, no matter where you're at, you're probably gonna be good to go, because it's something, those tides can turn very, very quickly. But to talk about the role of corruption and those types of things and how bad it can get, just from a social side and how fast it can get. Have I ever talked with you guys about Serpico? Usually comes up in the undergraduate stuff in policing, so I don't really talk to them outside of survey and American policing. And I don't think that I've had any of you in here for that, at least not the top of my mind. If you want to know the extent to corruption and how far it can go, read Serpico. His writings, he's actually, he's published a few things, newspaper articles, stuff like that. He had a movie made about him related to that Al Pacino stars as the lead Serpico. And basically, what was a police officer identified in New York City, corrupt practices, and started notifying these people because he's here. What ends up happening? Well, whenever his notices to these people didn't work, I want to say he tried to go over their heads and go here. That didn't work either. This is a good way to get your head cut off. It's like, anytime you address any of these issues, you always start wherever you're at, whatever level you're at, but you start at the lowest level and you can work from there. That's part of using the system itself, is you always go with the fewest number of people to involve at the lowest level that you're trying to resolve something, just to make it easier for everyone. Though many times you do have to escalate. Serpico was here, so he was working undercover, working vice, a few different areas. I wanna say, by the point in time he gave up on staying within the institution, whistleblowing there, he decided to go to the media because no one else was listening. They heard. As a result, the entire New York City Police Department hated Serpico. Hated him. So much so that on one day, he got called to serve an arrest warrant with a couple other police officers in an apartment building. He goes into the apartment building. The officers are right behind him. He walks up to the door. He knocks on the door. Door opens up. He says, "Police, I'm here to police." Person behind the door tries to shut the door on him. The person behind the door was the guy who they had the search warrant for, arrest warrant for. As he's stuck between the door, he's yelling for backup. He looks back, his two guys are gone. He turns back around, he sees a bright flash of a pistol going off in his face. Next thing he remembers hearing, one of the neighbors actually called an ambulance for him for getting shot in the face. His partners left him there to die. They left the damn building. Left him to die. Okay. Neighbor calls ambulance. Ambulance shows up. Police escort is even on record saying that if he'd have known that the ambulance was transporting Serpico, he'd have let the fucking rat die. Yeah, you got some serious corruption there. Right? What happened after the fact? Serpico got a commendation for his whistleblowing. I want to say so did the officers who left him there to die. Both of those officers moved up into administration. Serpico did not. Yeah, like there is some nasty shit out there. That's why this area is so hard to get into, because as soon as you get into it, you enter the world of politics and social bullshit. I've had a fair bit of that in the last few weeks. That's why I've been slow to grade stuff. This is a pain in the ass to deal with. Finding people who want to do what's right without coloring things in their own flavor kind of thing. Not always easy. Luckily though, there isn't much of a mid for that group. It's just, I'm down here and people I'm working with are up here. And it's like, good, we can take care of it. But it starts out like this. You have to go with the information that's available, find out how the thing actually operates, who's doing what, are they actually doing it? And if not, then finding out, okay, what actually is happening from there, because at that point in time, no one's watching anything. The opportunity for criminal behavior is extremely high, and it doesn't take much to get into very, very serious territories. Right? In the meantime, you're gonna be dealing with all the politics of everyone who's friends with everyone else in that organization, because they'll have been there longer than you have, and they'll be friends. They'll like you less than they like the other person. Doesn't matter if the other person's in the wrong. They don't like you. They definitely like the other person. And so who's going to do what, when, and where, and why, then becomes a major question. So that's why no one does this stuff. Major pain in the ass. If you ever find yourself in an opportunity where you have to make those types of decisions, God help you. Hopefully you've got a good sense of right and wrong, and hopefully you document everything, because you'll need to. Beyond that, any question? Okay, so it's about 7:30. We talked for quite a bit. I talked a lot, it seemed. Anything else? I just realized I'd left this screen sharing thing up, so that it only had a small thing here for me. I don't like that. If I had to do that again, let me know. I'm not watching the screen as closely as I should, but yeah. What you need to do is make sure it's not just you, you're not alone if you're going to have to deal with something like this. If you're having to research it, it's extremely hard to get into these groups because of this. Well, danger is always abound. Next up, since 7:25, next one we have business crime prevention. See what it says. Significant portion of all crimes committed directly against businesses. Again, if you look at crimes against person, crimes against business, businesses have a big category, a lot of money. Usually what they're talking about here are small level thefts. You know, your shoplifting, that kind of stuff. Only in the later half of the chapter, they really start getting into this kind of stuff. This is whenever the organization itself has gone awry. Each organization is unique. Each organization will have its own spirit, for lack of a better word, that mission, its goals, what it's trying to do. Then you have the people who are involved in the organization who make it up, and then you have their collective actions and what they actually do. All right. So from there, I want to say, anything else I want to talk about versus that? We're talking about shrinkage, crime. Done there. Yeah, I think I'm done for today. I ranted on and off about that stuff enough. And so, if you have any more questions about systems, how they work in relation to crime, how to suss that out, if you have to find yourself in it, it's going to be something like that. If you want to start studying it, realize it is a very difficult task to get into it because you end up with stuff like this. With that, I don't know, I'm kind of tired for today. You guys want to call it a day? All right, so we'll call it out there and then we'll finish out this chapter, and then what we'll do is talk about what were the next chapters in here, because there was one where I wanted to jump back and talk about items themselves and how those are crafted to prevent crime. And then there was one, I guess I don't have that book anymore. Let's see if I got that. No. Oh, well, we'll just pick up that next time. And with that, if there aren't any questions or you guys want to talk about anything else, I suppose I'll let you guys go for the day. All righty. All right, cool. All right, well, you take care and I will see you soon. Don't forget about this. Yeah, don't forget about the stuff that's in Blackboard, and then I'll be working on grading immediately. Then have a great day. Bye.